Hi, I'm Jeff Kazerman, Vice President of Government Relations at the New Jersey Society of CPAs, and welcome to this special edition of IssuesWatch. I'm joined today by Tim Sullivan, the CEO of the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, and we've had him on before, and thanks so much for joining us again, Tim.
Well, thanks so much. I'm thrilled and honored to be back.
Last week, the EDA announced phase 3 of the Small Business Emergency Assistance Grant Program. Phase 3 is funded with $70 million in CARES Act money and includes funding for restaurants, micro businesses, and opportunity zone businesses. Tim, I'll turn it over to you to tell our viewers about program eligibility, the pre-registration process, and anything else they need to know. But first, I want to remind our viewers, if you have any questions during the presentation, please enter them in the chat, and we'll try to field as many of them as possible during the presentation. Okay, Tim, take it away.
Great, thanks, Jeff, and great to be back with you. This is at least the third or fourth time we've been on your show, essentially, here during this pandemic, and always great to visit with you. The governor and the Senate president and the Assembly Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor were together, along with Senator Menendez and Congressman Malinowski last week in Hillsborough to announce the funding we're here to talk about today. This is CARES Act. This is federal CARES Act funded small business support. And if we're if we're sort of thinking about the pandemic and the economic impact of the pandemic, I think it's not hyperbole or exaggeration to describe this as hopefully once in a lifetime level of distress and dislocation in our economy. First and foremost, of course, this is a public health crisis, but right behind it, it's an economic crisis. It's an economic crisis that's bearing down on small businesses, particularly on small businesses owned by women and people of color. And so the governor and the elected leadership of the state, I think, have come together to recognize the importance of supporting small businesses in this moment of crisis. I've been thinking this, and maybe it's not as true as I'll make it seem, but so much of the response to the pandemic is deeply complex. I don't know the first thing about how to develop a vaccine. I surely don't know how to organize a public health response or think about how to educate kids over long distances and all this kind of stuff that's being kind of worked out in real time by both public and private sector experts. As it relates to supporting small business, it's somewhat simple. At a time when consumer behavior is driving small business activity down quite a bit, particularly for restaurants, particularly for businesses that rely on foot traffic and density, which New Jersey is our calling card. This is relatively simple. They need money. They need money to survive and get through this worst part of the crisis until they can get back onto their front feet and serving customers and serving their communities in which they're located again at full speed. And so we're thrilled and privileged to be able to work on these programs and deliver some of this federal money where we think it can go. Can go the furthest, which in the context of this third phase of grant programs, as you mentioned, Jeff, is broken into 3 buckets: restaurants, micro businesses, businesses under 5 employees, and then sort of generally all other small businesses. I think my colleague Rachel has some slides that are going to help me navigate some of this. I'm going to hand it to my other colleague, Patience Purdy, to walk through the particular details of this. But if we could get the slides up, that'd be great. Thank you, Rachel. Gesundheit. Give me the next slide, please, Rachel. So this is a continuation of a robust suite of programs that Governor Murphy and our team have been championing and administering since March, since the very first couple days and weeks of this crisis. We've had a number of grant programs. We have a loan program. We have a number of partnerships with CDFIs and other financial institutions to advance this recovery and this sustainability of small businesses during this crisis. Next slide, please. And importantly, through this crisis already, just through October 16th, we supported more than 21,000 businesses directly, and with more than $76 million of funding. That number, both those numbers click up every day. We're still administering phase 2. And so just to mention that in a normal year, the EDA might work with between small businesses and tax credits and other things we do. Might work with 300, 400, 500 businesses in a given year. This is 21,000 in 7 or 8 months. So it's been just an extraordinary scale. And I just want to take a moment to thank and recognize the team that's doing all the work within EDA to bring these programs out efficiently and with the right compliance and oversight, but also with some speed. Next slide, please. So importantly, we've focused on trying to get this funding where we think it can have the biggest impact. 20% of the funding has gone to minority-owned firms, 23% to women-owned firms, 2% to veteran-owned firms. 36% of the grants are in opportunity zone eligible census tracts. That's a federal map that allows us to target businesses that are located in areas that have high unemployment, high poverty, and low income, even before the crisis. And that's we reserved at least a third of the funding in phase 2 for those census tracts. We will do so again here in phase 3. Next slide, please. So what you're all here to hear about, and I'm going to do this slide and then hand it to my colleague Patience to walk through the rest of this in some more detail. Phase 3, $70 million, 70 million to support small business through this crisis. It's broken into 3 buckets. Restaurants are $35 million, micro businesses, which are businesses between 1 and 5 full-time equivalents, are allocated $15 million, $15 million, and then everybody else up to 50 employees has an allocation of about $20 million. The most important part of this whole webinar, this whole thing you're taking the time to look at and take during your lunch hour to learn about, you got to pre-register online between Monday of this week and October 27th, which is next Tuesday at 5 p.m. You've got to pre-register. If you do not pre-register and you go on the morning the application opens and try and apply, you will not be able to. Pre-registration is a required part of this process. Again, I'll say that one more time for everyone in the back. Pre-registration is a required part of this process between October 19th and October 27th. You have to pre-register. More than 10,000 businesses have actually pre-registered already in the last 2.5 days. You've got to pre-register. We'll then open the application window on October 29th at 9 a.m. for restaurants, on October 30th at 9 a.m. for micros, and on November 2nd, there's a weekend in between there, for all other applicants, businesses up to 50 employees. We're doing larger eligibility this time, up to 50 full-time equivalents this time around for both restaurants and the all other applicants bucket, and larger award sizes, because we're up against a pretty tight deadline to get this funding awarded prior to the end of this calendar year. So we're doing larger award sizes as well this time, which we think obviously will have a positive impact. You can pre-register. The best place to go to pre-register is the state's coronavirus business web portal, which is located at CV, as in coronavirus, cv.business.nj.gov. Should take you no more than a few minutes, and you get pre-registered. You get an email confirmation. You get it all set up, and then the morning of the application hopefully will be a little bit less stressful. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to hand it to Patience Purdy, who can tell you about all the details of starting with the restaurant program, and then I'll be back for some Q&A once she finishes. So Patience, over to you.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, so I'm going to minimize this, and we're on restaurants. Thanks, Rachel. So as Tim said, restaurants highly impacted, and the largest bucket of this program is $35 million dedicated to restaurants. We are expanding the way we look at the program and looking at those businesses that are 5 or fewer, whether they're restaurants or not. In this instance, we're talking about restaurants, and you can get a grant award of up to $10,000. So some eligibility requirements. For restaurants, you must have a NAICS code of starting with 722. You can Google that if you haven't done it before. Put your type of establishment in there. But the 722 NAICS code covers, from what we've all seen, nearly every kind of food services or drinking places establishment that you can imagine. Physical location in New Jersey, registered to do business in New Jersey. This is a very, very, very important part of the process. And there are 2 steps in this. When you get into the application, and I'll point that out, We do provide you with a link to see for yourself if you're registered properly. And if you're not, then the link that we've provided you will then link you on to continue that process. But being registered to do business in New Jersey is a must. And the nice thing about this particular program with the pre-registration is if you get into that pre-registration, you realize you're not registered properly, you have time. This is open until next Tuesday at 5 p.m. Must be in good standing with the Department of Labor. There is a department legal questionnaire that you would need to fill out. Essentially, do I do any of these things for illegal reasons? No. And then you'll need to certify to the negative impact of the emergency. 3 different levels of awards for restaurants: 5 or fewer, up to $10,000, 6 to 25, up to $15,000, and 26 to 50, up to $20,000. Just to reiterate, pre-registration is a must, open from the 19th through the 27th at 5 p.m. And then there is a schedule for when the actual application will open. And for restaurants, that is on Thursday, October 29th. Rachel, we can go to the next one. So another very important business group that we wanted to make sure that we covered well are micro businesses, businesses with 5 or fewer employees. We saw through the first 2 phases of the program that there were a lot of sole proprietors. And so being able to assist them potentially at a greater level was very important. Same eligibility criteria: physical location in New Jersey, registered to do business, legal questionnaire, impact of emergency, and then again, pre-registration, and then those applications would open on Friday the 30th. We're going to go through these quickly because I want to show you the application slides, and our eligibility is going to be essentially the same for all of them without the NAICS code on the restaurants. The next slide, Rachel. So our next business grouping are small businesses. Businesses from 6 to 25 would be eligible for up to $10,000, and 26 to 50 would be eligible for up to $15,000. That application will go live on Monday, November 2nd at 9 a.m. Again, pre-registration is mandatory. So Rachel, if you take us to the next slide, I think we'll start looking at the application process. No, opportunity zones. 33% of all phase 3 funding is reserved for eligible businesses in eligible opportunity zone census tracts. There is a map tool on the business portal. You can put your address in there. It'll tell you if you're in the census tract. And then we provide language access services to non-English speaking applicants. The application, the pre-registration, and then the application will be available to be filled out in Spanish. And you can also see the application in 10 additional languages on that cv.business.nj.gov portal. If you're having issues filling out the application and you need assistance with language, we have a language help at NJEDA.com email address that you can reach out to, and we'll have someone from that group reach out to you with a translator and walk you through what you're not understanding about the application process. Rachel, we can go to the next one. Again, applications in multiple languages. Next slide. Required information, things you're going to want to know before you dive into that pre-registration, things that are good to have. Sample application, which you're about to see, is also available on the business portal. Make sure you have your contact information, primary business address, all of that readily available. If you've received other government assistance, make sure you've got a listing of what that is, how much it is, whether it was a loan or a grant. You're going to want to know your business's full legal name, the one you used when you registered with the state of New Jersey, what type of entity you are, what year you were established, your tax ID, employment numbers from first quarter 2019 through second quarter of 2020. Again, we're going to reference the North American Industry Classification System, the NAICS code, most important if you're a restaurant. And then your annual revenue and your revenue loss due to COVID. Those are going to be important things that, if you get those ready in advance, you'll breeze through that pre-registration and even then the application process. Rachel, the next slide. Here we go. So the pre-registration opened on the 19th. We've gone through these numbers, and this is being recorded, and you can also access this on the portal. So next slide, Application Center. So when you click through on the link, you'll come to the NJEDA Application Center. If you've never been here before and never logged in before, then you don't have a username and password. If you've applied for our microloan, you have a username and password, and you would start right here. If you've never been here before, you don't have your username and password, then you're going to be a first-time user. You're going to click the register button, and Rachel, show us what we get if they click the register button on the next slide. Okay, here we go. So then you're going to enter your email, your username that you've selected, a password, and confirm it. You'll click, and I believe the blue button, it's hidden by Zoom, says either update or submit at the bottom there. And then we'll get to the next page. Once you click the register for your information, you're gonna get a, come onto this next page, and we're gonna ask you to fill this out, confirm your email address is correct, and then hit complete. Come to the next page, and we're going to send you an email. We're going to say that we need to confirm your email address. We do this because we want to make sure we communicate with you about this application process via email. So we need to make sure that we have the correct email address in there. So in order to proceed with the actual pre-registration, you're going to need to confirm your email. You're going to get an email from us, and click on it. You're going to get a note that says we've sent you an email. On the next page, you'll see what that email looks like. Oh, it's gone. You won't see what that email looks like. You'll get an email. When you click on that, that's going to take you here to the Online Application Center. You'll click on the Phase 3 grant pre-registration. Next, it'll take you to Start My Pre-Registration, and then we'll get into the actual pre-registration process. So that's all just logging in. The most important part of that logging in is creating your username and password and confirming your email. Your username and password is what you're going to use when application go live day comes to get back into the system and fill out the remainder of the application. Here's where we're going to start asking you questions about your business and getting some details from you. The first page is basic contact information and confirming that you are an authorized signer for the business entity. What's the legal registered business name, and if you have a DBA. We can go to the next. Street address, zip code. There is a lookup for the zip code. Click on the lookup, select your zip code. It will also then, when you get to the city, populate with cities that are associated with that zip code. It'll pre-populate the state and the county. Ask if it's a commercial location and if you're a home-based business. Answer those questions, hit next at the bottom, on to the next page. We're going to ask you the date your business was established and operational. One of the things you need to remember is that your business must have been established and operational by February 15th of 2020. So February 16th, not eligible. February 15th, absolutely fine. Next question is your business still in operation as of today? Now, you may have had to close because of the executive order, because of a number of reasons due to COVID, but you're keeping your business going, you're still operational. So difference in the question between is your business open versus is your business still in operation? And then questions about your ownership structure, and places for you to add owners to that based on what your answer is on the ownership structure of the business. We can go to the next one. Obviously your EIN is not a 3, but in order to get all of these to show up when we went through it, we had to put something in there. We're going to ask you for your EIN. Something's going to automatically happen then. We're going to look up your EIN based on a list that we already have. If you don't show up on the list that you already have, which is not fully comprehensive, we're going to ask you to certify that your business is properly and fully registered with the state. You're going to answer yes to that, but we really want you to click on the link to determine whether or not you are. It takes just a few moments, and this seems to be a place where a lot of our micro businesses are not properly registered through the two-step process with the state of New Jersey. Takes a couple of minutes, takes you to a treasury link. You enter your EIN, the first 4 letters of your business, hit enter, and it will come up with your certificate if you're there, or that they cannot confirm that you're registered. We ask questions about how you file your taxes. We ask questions about if you file WR30s, if you use a professional employment organization. Those questions help us in figuring out your full-time employees. So for the size of your business. The next slide. Number of full-time employees reported on your Q1 2020 or Q2 2020 WR30 filing, most recent that you have. Number of part-times, 1099s, 1099 part-time, and your 2019 annual revenue. Again, going back to the list of things that we said, have those ready before you get started. Next. Have you filed taxes with the state of New Jersey 2018, 2019, or none? You know, maybe you're a nonprofit using a 990 and you don't file that way. I imagine this audience has some higher knowledge of that than I do. Next slide, please. These designations are can be if you're a registered minority-owned or if you're a self-identified minority-owned, woman-owned, veteran-owned, or disabled-owned. And by all means, you do not have to identify if you don't wish to. Next slide. Business category. This is your NAICS code. There is a lookup right within the pre-registration. So if you click the search bar, you can type in a description of your business, 1 word, 2 words. If you haven't done the Google search on NAICS before coming to this spot. And then again, very important if you're a restaurant, that you've got the right NAICS code. And then next question, in the previous 6 quarters, which quarter did your business have the highest employment? Reason we're asking this is because we understand that right now, businesses may not have what their typical employment numbers are. And we want to look at you as your business would be if we weren't in a pandemic. And then questions pertaining to that. Did you file an NJWR 30? In the highest quarter per your answer, how many full-time employees were reported? Next question or next slide. And then details. Here are the some legal questions. Did you host gambling? Did you do things for illegal reasons? Do you purvey adult activities? Answer honestly, click next, and we're on to the next slide. And that's it for the pre-registration. You're all done. Agree to be bound by your electronic signature and certify that you are an authorized signer for the organization. And that is the process for pre-registration. You'll hit submit. Once you're submitted, you're in our system. You'll get a confirmation email. I think we have a picture of that on the next page. There it is. You'll have a application, a pre-registration number assigned to you that'll start with MOLA. And again, you'll see the date and times of when you need to log in based on what size business you are, whether you are a restaurant, a micro, or a small. Next slide. The actual application. So when it comes time for you to log back in, the actual application is going to focus mainly on COVID impact. Were you deemed an essential business? What capacity was your business able to reopen? This is where we're gonna ask you to outline the other assistance that you've received and what your revenue loss was. And then what is your additional financial need as a result of COVID after that other COVID assistance? We're going to ask questions about what the grant proceeds, also ask questions about what the grant proceeds will be used for if you're approved. Next slide. If you're not sure what your grant size or eligibility is, on the cv.business.nj.gov website is a grant size estimator. And on the next slide, Rachel, There's also an eligibility estimator. So both of those things can help you through the process as well. There's also application slides and frequently asked questions. Let's go to the next slide. The PPP Access Program. The PPP Access Program is going to open on October 28th. And it's going to provide a discount to businesses that purchase their personal protective equipment through the COVID-19 NJ.gov PPE access link. So it's a $24 million program of CARES Act funding, allowing us to assist small businesses in discounted access to personal protective equipment. Next slide. And that is our phase 3 grant program. And then we're happy to ask questions or answer them.
Okay, great. Thank you. We've got quite a few questions here. Let's start with the first one, which is kind of an interesting question. Regarding the restaurant program, someone would like to know whether or not a food truck would count as a restaurant.
So food trucks do count as restaurants, and what they can do, and again, and I maybe Google is more my best friend than other folks' best friend, but if you Google NAICS code and go to the NAICS website and just type in a little bit about your business, it's going to pull up all of the possibilities for NAICS codes that you fall under, but you'll see that food trucks do fall under that 722.
Great. Also like to know, does self-employed or sole proprietor, okay, I'm sorry. Does a self-employed or sole proprietor with no employees qualify?
Yes, they would qualify under the micro business program, 5 or fewer. So 0, definitely fewer.
Okay, so I guess then that answers this. Yeah, that took care of 2 questions that we had. What is the definition of a woman-owned business or a minority-owned business? What ownership percentage qualifies?
I don't know that I have a specific answer.
Yeah, it's someone doesn't. We're not asking for. This is a self-identification question. Answer is if you believe you're a woman or minority owned, click yes.
Okay, great. Regarding the question of certifying that one will not be laying off workers, is that as of the business current payroll levels?
I believe it's a best effort, right? So we ask you to certify that you will maintain your best effort not to lay off workers, right? So the goal of all 3 phases of the grant program is keep the business going, keep the staff employed.
Okay, here's another one. Is a 20% reduction in revenue required? For what period is that reduction measured?
There's not a specific percentage of revenue reduction required. You've got to show an unmet need, right? So if you're, just to take it down to really easy terms, if in 2019 your annual revenues were 100,000 and we're approaching the end of 2020 and you're at about 40, you've gotten a PPP and an EIDL grant, right? We're going to look at what your unmet need is based on where you were, where you are, and what you've received.
Okay. How much cash reserves are considered to be significant? Significant enough so that they cannot apply?
So the application itself doesn't ask about cash reserves, but the grant agreement, should you be approved, would. And what we're not looking to do is have you empty out your cash reserves. So I don't know that there's a specific number tied to that, but we're not looking for you to empty out your cash reserves so that the business isn't flush. We're still going to be looking at where were you then, where are you now, what have you received to get you to a good point, and what's the gap there.
Does a church qualify for any of these programs?
So, so there are aspects of, I think churches have programs within them that may qualify, but there are federal, what's the word, provisions, not depending on what those money, what the funds go to fund, right? So, for example, I don't believe we can fund the salary of your pastor. But potentially if you are running daycare programs, right? So if the church has an in-house daycare program that has been affected by COVID, then the church is the entity, the daycare program, which is what would fall under eligibility.
Okay. Will an applicant be eligible if they receive the PPP loan and/or the SBA EIDL grant? Not sure if I pronounced that right. EIDL.
So there's an EIDL grant and there's an EIDL loan. The PPP and the EIDL grant are going to be factored into whether or not you have an unmet need. So again, that goes back to unmet need. It's going to depend on where you were, where you are, and where that gap is based on what you've received. But eligible to apply, certainly. And given the length of time of the pandemic, we assume that most businesses have an unmet need.
Okay. If you fall under the micro business category and you did not file a WR30, do you still qualify?
So the WR30 is how employment is determined. So if you've got 1099 employees, those are different, but you still would qualify if you're a micro with 4 employees anyway, but you don't file WR30s for them. That micro program is going to recognize you as an individual or a zero anyway, and it's a $5,000 program. So whether you're 0 or 5 in that program, it's an up to $5,000 grant.
Okay. That was good. You handled a lot of questions there. And that was our last question. So I want to thank both of you, Tim and Patience, for joining us today to share this very important information and news that the small business community really needs to know about.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us, and good luck to everybody. Gotta pre-register.
Thank you. And thank you for watching. Remember, you can learn more about the grant program and you can pre-register at CV, that's C as in cat, V as in Victor, .business.nj.gov. We will be posting a copy of the slides and the recording of this presentation on NJCPA.org, and we'll be doing that shortly. So wishing everybody a great day.